Again with the classic Michael Handel's Masters of War, Classical Strategic Thought, Third Revised and Expanded Edition. This is from Clausewitz and Mao Zedong on theory and practice in war. So first a quote from Clausewitz from On War. The influence of theoretical truths on practical life is always exerted more through critical analysis than through doctrine. Critical analysis being the application of theoretical truth to actual events. So Handel here, to make a fortune in business, one simply has to buy cheap and sell high. This well-known advice seems clear enough, but if it were that easy to translate into reality, everyone in business would be wealthy. In much the same way, the theory of war is not that difficult to understand. The principles of war and the essence of good strategy are certainly no secret. They include familiar concepts such as avoiding a war on two fronts, defining clear objectives, identifying the principle of concentration, the culminating point of victory or a center of gravity, achieving surprise, employing deception, and carefully planning military action on all levels with rational calculations. In war, as in business, it is not possible for all of the participants to succeed simultaneously, and certainly not in the long run. Thus, although the principles and logic of waging war are widely known, their implementation is seldom straightforward or formulaic. Clausewitz never tires of reminding us that there is a great, quote, great chasm between planning and execution, and that, quote, everything in war is very simple, but even the simplest thing is difficult. It is clear why any teacher of strategy or military affairs should be concerned with this question. After all, why should one write or teach about war or business or politics for that matter, if there is no guarantee that anyone will be able to profit from this wisdom in practice? Mao Zedong also considers the question of theory versus practice at great length. So this is from Selected Military Writings, Mao Zedong. To learn is no easy matter, and to apply what one has learned is even harder. Many people appear impressive when discoursing on military science in classrooms or in books, but when it comes to actual fighting, some win battles and others lose them. Both the history of war and our own experience in war have proved this point. And then again in another part of Selected Military Writings, the concentration of troops seems easy, but is quite hard in practice. Everybody knows that the best way is to use a large force to defeat a small one, and yet many people fail to do so. The short answer to this problem is that some knowledge and a few good insights are still better than nothing. And although such knowledge cannot produce perfect answers in the real world, it does at least provide the practitioner with some general or specific guidance while preparing him to some degree for the uncertainties and difficulties he will encounter. The wide gap between theory and practice arises from the unpredictable nature of war and the fact that it can never be waged as an exact science. A military strategist contemplating the complexity of war must consider factors such as the staggering number of variables involved, the fact that key elements cannot be clearly measured, isolated, or controlled, the reciprocal nature of action and reaction, the role of friction, chance and luck, the effects of secrecy and deception, the best way to deal with inadequate or unreliable intelligence, the paradoxical nature of risk, and the influence of moral factors. War, therefore, always consists of unique situations that can be resolved only through subjective analysis, which by its very nature cannot be readily incorporated into a theory of war because it depends on creativity, talent, intuition, and experience. Action in war, particularly on the operational level, can rarely be based on objective analysis alone. Thus, the inherently nonlinear, unpredictable nature of war means that the gap between theory and practice can never be completely bridged, although it can sometimes be narrowed. This, in a way, is the subject of the entire operational theory of war. Proposed operational solutions range from the principle of concentration to the meticulous preparation of flexible plans and contingency plans, logistical preparations, the acquisition of better real-time intelligence, and the use of secrecy and deception, while preventing the enemy's use of the same. In this context, however, it is interesting to compare the theoretical solutions proposed by Clausewitz and Mao. Clausewitz aspires to close the gap between theory and practice by relying on the experience and intuition of the military commander. Mao, in addition to relying on experience, hopes to find the solution in objective scientific estimates and analysis of the military situation. At first glance, Clausewitz and Mao appear to be advocating diametrically opposed solutions, one largely subjective and the other largely objective. In truth, however, these two approaches overlap and are essentially subjective. Furthermore, both ultimately fail to find a satisfactory solution. Clausewitz is a great believer in the value of experience because he knows that the theoretical understanding of war has its limitations, that even the best theory does not hold all of the answers. Referring to his own theory, Clausewitz says, quote, this from On War, note to an unpublished manuscript on the theory of war, quote, no logical, that is theoretical, conclusion has been avoided. But whenever the theoretical thread becomes too thin, I've preferred to break it off and go back to the relevant phenomena of experience. Just as some plants bear fruit only if they do not shoot up too high, so in the practical arts, the leaves and flowers of theory must be kept close to its proper soil, experience. Theory is secondary in the sense that it is derived from the observation of reality. So Clausewitz again, in On War, a satisfactory theory of war is one that will be a real service and never conflicts with reality. It only needs intelligent treatment to make it conform to action and to end the absurd difference between theory and practice that unreasonable theories have so often evoked. And then again in another part of On War, theory is content to refer to experience in general, to indicate the origin of the theoretical method, but not to prove it. And again, in another part of the book, the idea we wish to convey will always have its origins in the impressions made by the sum total of the phenomena of war rather than in speculative study. And again, another part of the book, these theoretical truths must be rooted in experience. No theorist and no commander should bother himself with psychological and philosophical sophistries. And again, theoretical truth must have been derived from military history or at least checked against it. A great advantage offered by this method is that theory will have to remain realistic. It cannot allow itself to get lost in futile speculation, hair-splitting, and flights of fancy. And two more. So here again is in another part of On War. In almost any other profession, a man can work with truths he has learned from musty books. It is never like that in war. And finally, in the art of war, experience counts more than any amount of abstract truths.